All right, tea adjournment there at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. Kat Matlala is back on the witness stand today. Today, lead counsel for Matlala advocate Annelien van der Heever is present at the commission and has been in her element, interjecting at every instance where she feels her client could be compromised and be forced to speak on matters where he could implicate himself. Now, Advocate Matlala prompting Kat Matlala to take the commission through his relationship with Morgan Mamea and Suleiman Karim. What a struggle it has proven to be to just get Matlala to speak on his relationship with the two. He has attempted to assert his privilege against self-incrimination, but the commissioners were having none of it. Saying it's not an all-encompassing privilege where he alone is of the view that he's being investigated and so holds the view that he cannot respond to certain questions. Now, they prompted him to share documents which indicate he's a suspect in certain matters they want to canvass with him. He couldn't prove through those documents, he couldn't prove he was a suspect, and thereafter he started to detail his relationship with Morgan Mamea. He says the relationship with Morgan Mamea started with their common love for sports cars, then it evolved into the two having shared funds which they would individually use for work awarded to them. So some sort of a capital pool that has been set aside by them as opposed to borrowing money from banks. And this is as simple as I can put it, because we heard there from evidence leader Matlala that she still struggled to understand what exactly is this capital pool. But two colleagues of mine that have been watching the proceedings quite closely might possibly be in a position to explain what we've just heard around this capital pool between the two of them. My colleague Ayanda Nyata now joins me from the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. A very good morning to you yet again, Ayanda. So we have now entered the realm of the relationship between Kat Matlala and Morgan Mamea. But now quickly it took us to some sort of a joint venture, if you will, where they were putting in funds away, and at any point when one of them would receive work either from government, they'd be able to draw from that pool, I suppose, as opposed to going to the bank. But it seems there's some sort of a struggle to understand exactly what was this capital pool.
Yeah, it's an explanation, Mfundo, that seems to have sent everyone in the room, including the commissioners and the evidence leader, into a bit of a tailspin as they try to get to the bottom of the nature of this relationship. What should not be lost on us, Mfundo, is what it took to even get here to begin with. There seemed to be a difficulty, I think for lack of a better term, from the witness and his legal representative to even allow Vusimuzi Matlala to go into the terrain of finally speaking about his relationship with Morgan Mamea as well as that with Suleiman Karim. But eventually it seems to have gotten around to doing that. We heard Matlala saying that they met in 2015, 2016. They share an interest in sports cars and in fact went on to then have joint ventures, which we initially understood to involve RFQs, that's a request for quotation. But as you then mentioned, that explanation got a bit muddied up when we got down to the nuts and bolts of the operations and how that actually works. Kenny Mapanga is also with us here at the Bridget Mabandla Justice College and has been listening into that explanation. Do I dare ask what you make of that and what you understood? But perhaps, Kenny, as a start, help us place why this is important, this relationship between Matlala and Mamea.
It's this very dynamic that confusing tale he just told seeks to get away from. If we remember the evidence of that relates to Hangwani Mamea, that was represented, I think it was given by Chief Evidence Leader Advocate Matthew Chaskerson when he explained the strange transactions. And it was largely through the evidence of Suleiman Karim, if you remember those transactions. And it seemed that with the SABC Medicare contract, because that's what the interest is here. It's that particular contract to the tune of 350 million. You see that when he got his first payment with respect to that contract, he sent a payment to Suleiman Karim. Suleiman then sends a portion of that payment to Hangwani Mamea. Now that's a very strange dynamic to look at, and it points to something allegedly more sinister in terms of transactions. Because why, if you needed to make a payment to that third party, why would it need to go through Suleiman Karim first? And that takes you back to allegations surrounding the manner in which the tenders are managed in terms of the alleged cartels. And that was something that Lieutenant General Dumsani Khumalo explained when he showed that the alleged cartels mix elements of criminality together with legitimate business, and then you'll also find tenders featuring in that particular network. Now, what Advocate Silo is really interested in is that particular relationship and that dynamic. How do you find yourself in this particular contract? And then when you get your first payment, after a long time where you were actually struggling to do purchase orders, you send a payment to Suleiman Karim, and then after that, a portion of that goes to Hangwani Mamela. And the Commission is trying to get to the bottom of that particular connection. I don't think that explanation about the RQFs has anything to do with this particular dynamic. And this is why Advocate Silo is saying that what is being stated under oath there is deliberate, because it's left them in a bit of a confusion as to how this business model works, because you won't be making a profit if you are throwing all this money into this particular RQF. But if you have a tender arrangement, let's put it that way, where allegedly that tender is being managed and the so-called profits are being paid back in installments as payments happen, then that becomes a logical explanation. But what we really, or rather what the Commission is really trying to get to, is understanding the dynamic between the three, because they are literally in one connection with respect to the payments relating to the SABC Medicare contract. And once you understand why that dynamic existed in the manner which it did, then you can understand the alleged criminality that could follow this particular contract and what the network between these three individuals could possibly be. And I think this particular confusing explanation seeks to distance oneself from that particular explanation. He even tried in an attempt with the SIU order, but it has been accepted that he's not a suspect in those particular matters. So he has to discuss this issue of Hangwani Mamela and Suleiman Karim, because it's very crucial to understanding the money flows that have already been put before the Madlanga Commission. But seemingly he had a different explanation on the table, which really is quite confusing when you look at the very obvious money flows and transactions with respect to the SABC Medicare contract.
And I want to speak a bit more about that SIU order, because like I said initially, it took a while to get us here, because it seems that the argument that Kat Matlala was making is that just because he can't prove that he isn't a suspect in these matters, it doesn't necessarily mean that he is not. There was a back and forth about that. In fact, his lawyer, Annelie van der Heever, also got involved until it eventually got to a stage where it seems there was consensus that the Commission, as it sits today, doesn't have anything suggesting that Kat Matlala is in fact a suspect in these matters. And it is after that hurdle was finally gotten over that we got to a point where Kat Matlala started introducing his relationship with Morgan Mamela. Take a listen.
With that understanding then, Mr. Matlala, can we start discussing your relationship with Mr. Mamela? Like I said, it would assist if you began it when you started with when that relationship began, and you define or you describe that relationship up to date. Thank you. Then we'll take it from there.
Yes, I will. I think that I first met Mr. Mamela, I think it'll be around 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. 2015, 2016, somewhere around there.
Thanks.
And my relationship with him, it was because both we have passion for sports cars. So there is this restaurant that we both we used to frequent in that restaurant somewhere in Sandton. So we used to meet each other there, and then because I like this car, and then that's when we started our relationship, because of the love of cars.
So would it be fair then to conclude that you are friends with Mr. Mamela and you share a passion for sports cars?
I conclude that, yes.
Do you have any other relationship with him, including business relationship or any relationship that leads to any one of you benefiting financially?
Yes, we do.
Can you tell us about that?
We were, both of us, we were in the, I wouldn't say that it's a tender, but it was, what is it called? Not a tender, but let's just say, for the lack of a better word, I'll say a tender, but it's not. Like when you get the RFQs, it's not a tender, it's something else. I don't know what they call it.
Well, call it an RFQ.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yes, we used to do that together.
All right, and that's when that explanation that I think has everybody in sixes and sevens ultimately followed. Kenny Mapanga, once again, is our senior reporter who's been listening into that. And Kenny, even earlier in the day, there seemed to be quite an exchange between the evidence leader, Advocate Sello, and Kat Matlala's lead counsel, Annelie van der Heever. This is important, of course, because a meal was made out of her absence yesterday. This is Annelie van der Heever's absence.
Yes, and I think it was made very clear by the Commission that the blanket approach is no longer going to work in terms of the proceedings going forward, because there was some kind of a suggestion that witness C's recording could possibly lead to an investigation against him, and that is sufficient enough for him to say he doesn't want to answer questions. She also wanted to bring in the manner in which the recording, she says, was obtained, and the suggestion there is that it was allegedly unlawfully obtained. But this particular posture seemingly is not going to be allowed without her dealing directly with the actual crime or the offense that is being dealt with by topic, so theme by theme. There's no longer going to be a blanket of, oh, we can't listen to the recording because this was discussed. You're going to have to be specific in terms of that constitutional court judgment in order for that to be the case. So I'm sure during this tea adjournment, she is looking up those references right now with respect to the recordings and any other future topics outside of the Lieutenant General Shadrack Sibiya one, which will be discussed by Advocate Hasim, in order to deal with this requirement now that has really placed a clear threshold on the privilege, which is there has to be a crime that is highlighted in order for you to assert this particular privilege in this evidence. Otherwise, if there's this blanket approach, you're not going to get anything from Vusimuzi Kat Matlala. It will just be the same exercise as yesterday where they spoke in circles. So it's about getting to the core of the evidence without also infringing on his rights, but also keeping in with the mandate of the Commission in terms of the other topics that they seek to discuss that don't engage this particular privilege.
We often speak about how the Madlanga Commission is a battleground of the titans, and I think that exchange, those interruptions and the pushback is, I beg your pardon, bears testament to that. So in case you're missing just even, I think, the mood in the room when that exchange took place, I think it's worth taking you back to that moment when Annelie van der Heever raised these objections and Advocate Sello pushed back strongly. Take a listen.
Yesterday, you have time and again expressed a view that you would not be answering any question relating or arising from such recordings on the basis that you understand that you are a suspect and you are being investigated in respect of matters discussed in those recordings. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, that's true.
I trust that your exhibit file has been updated. And my understanding is that you were given an assurance by the NPA that you are not being investigated or such recordings are not being utilized for purposes of investigating you, thus rendering you not a suspect as you feared. Are you aware of the assurances provided you by the NPA in that regard?
Maybe my learned friend can just direct me to the where she gets this information from, this assurance that she refers to, and what does it exactly relate to, or how. I wanted to understand where she gets the information that she currently raises and relies on. The issue of the assurance given by the NPA, that he will not be prosecuted for anything pertaining to these recordings. And these recordings, does it now mean it's recordings relating to December of 2024 and his arrest in May of 2025? And does it also include the unlawful recording that was made when he was approached in prison behind the back of his attorneys at that point in time?
Chair, I hear my learned friend's address to you. I submit it's absolutely irrelevant. I've posed the question to the witness, and the witness will answer my question. If Advocate van der Heever is interested in what I intend to have for lunch, it's a conversation we will have outside. She's not going to preempt my line of questioning. Only if we get to a point where she says, I have failed to do so, then I suggest that she's got no basis to be interrupting my examination of the witness. So, if you will, I've posed the question to the witness. I would like the witness to answer.
Chairperson, with the greatest of respect to my learned friend, when you pose questions to witnesses, again with respect, you need to have a basis on which you make a certain statement. And it's all I'm asking, is there a basis that she relies on? And it's not necessary to become aggressive about it. I simply am here to do my job. I'm asking, is the statement that she makes that assurances have been given, does it have a factual foundation? And if so, can we please just understand what the factual foundation is? Otherwise, what we are busy with here, with the greatest of respect, is to try and catch my client at this point with certain statements that made. If there is a foundation for a factual foundation, then just give it to us. There's nothing that says I'm not entitled to ask what the statement is based on.
The chairperson eventually intervened. The testimony continued, but we know that Annelie van der Heever now has the task of coming back with specific charges, which of course would enable Matlala to invoke his rights against self-incrimination if in fact she feels that he cannot delve into the recordings, which seem to be such a central part of at least the mid-morning part of his testimony today. We'll see whether she comes back with any of that evidence when the commission resumes its work at 11:30.